Hey there, athletes. Coach John Ferry here from Team Wilpers. Very excited to welcome you to the Week 2 athlete briefing for the Team Wilpers Half Marathon Challenge. So congratulations for the almost completion of Week 1. I know we're not quite there yet. And a special congratulations to everyone who completed their 20-minute distance test this week. Set the stage for the 9 weeks still to follow. Always a great start. So let's do a little week 1 review while some people are joining us here. So week 1, if you didn't do the distance test, our 20-minute distance test, you did our 30-minute progression runs. That means you touched on easy pace, marathon pace, half marathon pace, and per instruction, finished at a couple minutes at threshold, or at least a minute there, I believe is what I said last time. So a minute at threshold. So we moved through our pace ranges, had a really nice workout, hopefully reacclimated after a couple weeks of either easy pace running or doing some other stuff that kind of suited you during that time. This is a great way to practice hitting all that paces and a great way also to set the stage for the 9 weeks to follow. Key run number 2 here of week 1, we warmed up, inclusive of striders. Then we went into our first half marathon pace set of this challenge. So we did 5 minutes on, 5 minutes off, 5 minutes on. Really nice workout. Start to practice that pace early here. We're going to keep coming back to it over the scope of this challenge of time at half marathon pace so that by the time you get to your race of choice, you are ready to go, comfortable and confident with that half marathon pace. And our key run number 3, still coming up this weekend for a lot of you, for most of you probably. Our first long run, our week 1 range, 4 to 6 miles is easy peasy. I want all smiles on this one, start, middle, and end. I want you to be confident when you walk away from the end of this run that you had more to give. And if you feel during the scope of it that that's not the case, you just need to dial it back down, dial the effort back down so that it's easy in the middle, easy at the end. When you walk away one more time, you know that you had more to give. Quick reminder, my weekly reminder. As you're completing these workouts, go onto the website, check the box saying that I did this workout. You don't have to input the results, but you want to check that box because why? A 100% completion percentage at the end of this challenge is going to set you up with the best chance of success. It is amazing. A minus goal being if A plus is to complete and excel at your half marathon, A minus is to have a 100% completion percentage. So get in there, check that box, try to keep that goal out there for you of a 100% completion percentage. So now to week 1 workout. So our first workout of the week, we're going to continue working endurance. We talked a lot about last week that we want to work endurance in this, and we want to work up to half marathon pace. So this is going to be kind of at the beginning part of our process here, where we start to certainly add more volume, try to get our mileage up, and work a lot on endurance. As time goes on, those endurance runs will get a little more challenging. We'll be working a little bit more at pace across the scope of the week. Right now, endurance for this workout. So this workout is very intentionally broken up into 3 parts. The first part is the 10-minute warm-up. So this, whether you know or not, if you hover your mouse on the website over your easy pace, it is actually an easy pace range. I would love for one of these days for that to be displayed differently, but I've been told not yet. So one of these days we're just going to see it as a range and clear this up, but there is a range there. So as a warm-up, what we in essence want to do is use that range, start at the slower end of it, and it move to a spot where we feel fairly comfortable for the day. Now this is a very nebulous pace. It might be different, a little bit faster on some days and a little bit slower on other days. But what we want is to feel easy. Because then when we move into the 25-minute main set of this endurance run, we're settling at that pace that feels comfortable to run for 25 minutes consecutively. So I'm always the first to pick on myself very happily. There are certainly days where I feel like I can operate at the fast end of my easy pace range, and there are days that I don't even want to be at the low end of my easy pace range. So I try to allow myself to move throughout that pace range to find where I feel comfortable on that day, as opposed to the exact pace that I feel like I should be at. So that is why it is separated between the warm-up and the main set. Then we come into our strider section to finish the workout. So why are we doing this at the end of the workout? As many of you are familiar, a lot of times we do striders at the beginning of the workout as a warm-up. That's also a great thing to do. We put them here at the end of the warm-up or the end of the workout in this session, because what it does is it starts to break up that pace that you've been sustaining for 25 minutes. If we talk about an kind of a ramp up over the first 10 minutes, 25 minutes then at a very sustained pace, this is going to allow a little bit of a deviation. What ends up happening over the scope of that 25 minutes is you have a very locked in stride rate. When you're not changing pace, especially if you're not deviating incline that much. If you deviate incline, it helps a little bit, but you get this very similar stride length. So by including these striders towards the end of the workout, this is going to allow you to elongate that stride length a little bit, start to like open up, accelerate, pull back down, accelerate, pull back down. And actually, by putting these little accelerations in, can leave you feeling a little bit fresher at the end of the workout than if you just maintain the exact same stride start to finish. So it also sets the stage for some of the tempo work that we have to upcoming, where we're going to want to push that pace for longer periods of time, after longer periods of time and longer duration sets. So that is our finish, our 10-minute kind of strider, 15 seconds on, 45 seconds off. Just as a reminder, I know we've talked about in the past, striders are not sprints. They are not intervals. These striders are gentle accelerations ranging from easy pace all the way up to around, let's say for the scope of this challenge, half marathon and threshold pace. You know, I might go a little bit ahead of half marathon pace, but because this is a half marathon challenge, and that's the pace we're trying to get most comfortable and confident with, you want to move over the scope of 15 seconds. One more time. Doesn't mean that we go from easy pace to threshold pace back to easy pace instantaneously. It is a 15-second acceleration, and we want to peak. We want to peak at that kind of hard pace for just a couple seconds right at the end. So 3/4 of this is just moving up through your aerobic pace zone. The final little couple seconds, you're like tapping into threshold, and then you're right back down to easy. So this is once again, opportunity to break up the rhythm of your run, open up your stride length a little bit, hopefully actually leaving you fresher walking away at the end of your workout. No one asked this week, but it's been asked in the past, should you include a cool down a little bit extra on the end of this? You absolutely can. It's not required because the goal, remember, is to still stay aerobic, to keep the effort easy. But if having a 5-minute sort of ramp down on the end of this feels good to you, then absolutely follow that feeling. Run number 2 of the week, 30-minute hill run. So this is our first time including incline here in the work. So we're starting 10-minute warm-up inclusive of striders. Striders, back into the warm-up. See what we did there? 10-minute inclusive of striders. Once again, this is to prepare your body in this instance to take on some of the more intensity that's coming. Then we're moving into our 15-minute main set. So a little bit of confusion, but I'll try to clear it up right now. So 3 times 1 minute running uphill, 1 minute jogging downhill. The funniest thing I've found over the past year of doing these challenges is if you're doing this workout outside and we do 1 minute uphill while you're running fast, don't feel like you have to run exactly 1 minute back downhill, because that will probably take you past where you started. So if you run 1 minute uphill, just run 1 minute back to where you began. I love that everyone's good at following instructions, but that gave me a chuckle a while back, so it just actually hit my mind. So if you're outside, 1 minute up, 1 minute back to where we started. If you're running this inside on a tread, it's going to be 1 minute up, 1 minute on flat, full recovery before you go 1 minute up again. So we're doing that 1 minute up, 1 minute down 3 times. Then moving into our 3-minute sets, which is 3 minutes up, 3 minutes down, 3 minutes up, and then we're into the cool down, okay? For the flatlanders out there, you can do this workout certainly on treadmill. You can do this workout at parking garages, on overpasses. If you do not have a 3-minute uphill, which is understandable, just break the 3-minute set into shorter mini sets. If the biggest incline you have available is 30 seconds long, then break that 3-minute interval into 6 segments where you're 30 seconds up, 30 seconds down, 6 times. So you want basically the up time to equal 3 minutes total. So just break that out over the scope of the set. The reasons we work hills. One, most race courses have hills. Not all race courses have hills, but most of them, so we gotta be prepared. Two, whether it's a hill or not, it is great posterior chain activation and recruitment. So you certainly hear all the time, there's plenty of buzzwords of get your glutes engaged, et cetera, et cetera. This is a great way to force them into activity. They don't necessarily have to get forced to get work when you're running on flat. They can kind of get sleepy and fall by the wayside. When we all of a sudden increase the incline, we're really forcing that posterior chain to get involved, and your body over the time of repetition learns how to recruit those muscles for other running. So posterior chain activation. It's a great way to generate knee drive, and then in general, just improve running economy and efficiency. So these hill repeats not only serve as an important mechanism to help us get ready for the race itself, it also prepares us to get better and stronger in our run form and economy in general. And our final upcoming run of the week, our long run, 5 to 7 miles is our range for the upcoming week ahead. Once again, easy running on these start to finish. We absolutely will include, as part of this kind of 9-week journey ahead, some optional miles at pace built into some of these long runs, especially at the final week going into unload weeks, but we're not there yet. Right now we want easy pace and miles. This is not the time or place to start practicing running half marathon pace speed. It is absolutely not the time and place to be in between easy and half marathon pace speed. That's we'll call it the wrong zone. Like it could be referred to as the gray zone, but we're going to call it the wrong zone for this training right now. So if you're above easy and below half marathon pace, we're in the wrong zone. So don't be there. As you can see, 5 to 7 miles of the rain is a little spoiler alert. In the week ahead, it's going to be an advancement of 1 mile per week again. So we're working our way up week after week. For those who have been around our ecosystem for a while, you can kind of know to expect in week 4, after we've done 3 weeks of loading, that we're going to pull back and then start our progression again. So we're moving upward on a week by week basis. This week will also be the same next week. Keep these runs nice and light. Week 2 challenge, photo challenge, onwards and upwards. So share a photo or story about how you're executing your workout. So this week we're adding volume, strides, and incline. So feel free to use any of those things and share your story with us. We'll pick our favorite, send a little Team Wilpers swag your way. So make sure to tag @TeamWilpers, @TeamWilpersRunChallenge, and bonus points for using the hashtag TeamWilpersHalf, as it makes it much easier for me to find. So as the person going through looking for these things, little bonus tip, use the hashtag TeamWilpersHalf. Couple questions that have come up via the Facebook group here. So this question in general, and it's come up a lot between last week and this week, so I figured let's go ahead and address it now, even though it's quite a ways down the road, but it certainly is worth talking about and worth knowing, which is for those of you that have a half marathon, not exactly at the end of this challenge. So last week I tried to set the stage. This is a 10-week challenge. You can count out 10 weeks, but it ends up culminating right around the weekend of March 18th and 19th. That's an important week for us here in New York City, is the New York City Half Marathon. There are also a lot of other marathons around the country. I think I counted well over 50 marathons on half marathons on that weekend alone, which doesn't mean that there aren't plenty on other weekends. So as many of you have brought up, you have races a week before, a week after, many races before or after. So what I want to do is talk about, in general, how we need to chart out between now and then and kind of set yourself up in those final weeks leading into your race. So the first step is between now and your key race, how many weeks do you have? Write it down, because this is an important number. Part 2 of this, what is the longest long run you hope to achieve in advance of that race? And then part kind of B of that equation is, what is the intended taper you're hoping to do for your race? So for example, in this challenge, culminating on that weekend, we're probably shooting for our longest long run being in the ballpark of 10 to 12 miles. Not really in the ballpark, it's gonna be 10 to 12 miles is the recommendation we're giving for that longest long run. We are also going to use a 1-week taper in this program. So we're going to train right up to about 7 days before the race itself. Then we're going to take a 1-week taper leading down into the half marathon. There are plenty of athletes that want to do more mileage than that. There are plenty of athletes that want to do less mileage than that. There are plenty of athletes that want a longer taper than that. And there are plenty of athletes that don't want to taper at all. That is the wrong choice, but we'll get to that later. So in essence, what you're then looking at is how many weeks do you have? What is the longest long run you're hoping to achieve? And what is the taper time that you need to do? So if your race is earlier than planned, earlier than that weekend of March 18th and 19th, you're going to have to advance your long run progression in order to hit that longest long run and allow yourself the taper time that you want. So you'll be able to follow along with our workouts without much trouble, but you're going to have to advance that long run at a point that gets you to that happy spot that you want to be at before your race itself and allows you the taper time. If your race is later in the after that weekend, once again on March 18th, 19th, you'll be able to follow along all the way through this 10 weeks, through the final week. And then right as we're coming into that race week, that 1-week taper, you might need to, depending upon if it's 1 week later, 2 weeks later, etc., just kind of plan the weeks once again based upon the taper time you want and when you want your longest run to be. So it will just take a little finagling right around that time, but you certainly should be able to chart it out right now of kind of knowing when we're coming into that weekend of the 18th and 19th, this plan is going to be tapering down for a race that weekend. So hopefully that is helpful. Please submit follow-up questions or specific dates or races. I'll be happy to answer them as best as possible about how I would tweak around that time. But hopefully that gives a good overview. So just in conclusion, want to know exactly how many weeks between now and your race, exactly how long you want your taper to be. That gives you the exact date of your longest long run. And so I like to say you can reverse engineer from now to from basically that point to now exactly where you need to be along the way. Hopefully that helps. Kind of a general thing that came up this week, thought it was very relevant as we're going into longer long runs, is can I share some tips for cold weather running? And I kind of thought about this at first and was like, everybody knows this, but that's not true. And I had to remind myself that I goofed on my first many cold weather runs of this year after been doing this forever. So warm up. Our bodies don't warm up as efficiently in the cold weather. So it takes more time. So we need to allow more time. We need to start slower. We need to ease into our workouts. So a workout where you might be going from kind of the low end to top end of your easy pace in 5 minutes or 10 minutes. If the temperature is 20 degrees, it might take 20 minutes and 30 minutes till really you're starting to get that range of motion and opening up. Our muscles just don't respond quite as well. You know, when we're going into some of our intense workouts or our higher intensity things, you might just need a longer warm up in general. You might need to do more mobilization to get your body more ready to go. So don't try to be time crunched in this capacity. It simply does take more time to get warmed up in cold weather. For the run itself, appropriate attire becomes critical in running. So I don't like to push too much products. I'm not going to push anything in particular, but the attire really does become important. So I always like to think about starting with a base layer. So my base layer in wintertime, and I will say, let's go ahead and say 40 degrees and less, because if it's 40 degrees and more, I'm in shorts and a t-shirt, but I also have to know myself that I'm a human inferno. So 40 degrees and up, I'm in shorts and a t-shirt. So know yourself first and foremost. So I'm saying for 40 degrees and below, think of a base layer. So my base layer, I'm either doing shorts or running tights and a long sleeve shirt, not a sweater, not a jacket. I'm doing a long sleeve shirt. So that's a base layer kind of covering all pieces of skin. And then I'll talk about kind of adding on. So accessories then that I would add on as second layers would actually just be hats and gloves. I wouldn't necessarily, my second layer wouldn't be a jacket or like I said, a thick kind of runnable sweatshirt, etc. It would be adding those accessories. And for me personally, it's my hands. If I can keep my hands warm, then I'm a happy guy. Other people have nose, ears, toes, etc. There are all sorts of things that can make you very comfortable out there that you need to learn about yourself, but that would be my phase 2. So it's start with your base layer, add on your accessories. And then phase 3, I kind of called my notes here the deep freeze. You know, if it's a very, very cold outside, at which point I'm looking to either add like a vest, a jacket, potentially even a face covering if there's a high wind and really low cold. So for me, this would probably be certainly less than 30, probably even less than 20. I'm looking to add these things into my routine. So while in winter you want to be very comfortable and you certainly can dress yourself up, you also don't want to overdress so much that you're burning up. It is important in wintertime running in general, clothing or outside of attire, to make sure that you're still hydrating even though you don't feel as thirsty. You're still sweating plenty. When you especially start zipping up running jackets and things over top of your kit, you can be very, very hot and uncomfortable in a hurry, so just be cautious of that. The best way is to practice in controlled environments, to learn learn to trust your gear so that you can feel comfortable and confident when you get outside. But cold weather running should be absolutely enjoyable. It just takes a little bit of forethought and planning to get your kit right. Our kind of last question here is it unpractical or unrealistic to have a specific half marathon goal time for race day, especially if our current training half marathon pace is slower than goal race pace? Just wondering if training faster than current race pace in our profile is okay to achieve goal time, or does this increase risk for injury? Great question. I'm sure one that hits a lot of people's inquiries. Matt and I talk about this fairly often and actually find it's one of the harder things to do, to know when to appropriately advance athletes' pacing targets. So we'll kind of back into that question and start at the end, which is you certainly, if you are overtraining, running these paces too hard, you definitely open the door for injury. You also run the risk of flat out overshooting the pace targets and training a different energy zone that you didn't intend. So if we're doing sub-threshold style work and we're intending for you to be aerobic, but you're 20 seconds faster per mile than what we're thinking, then you're training VO2 max, and you really shouldn't be training to VO2 max at the duration of the intervals that we're doing. So it is important to train the right zone with the right duration, with the right recoveries. We've talked about that over the course of time. That being said, there are some things that could go along with that. Plenty of people have talked about not feeling that they executed their distance test right. So if you feel like you maybe left a little on the table in the distance test and it didn't quite give you the goal that you were hoping for, it might be worth doing a retest coming off of a lighter day or in place of a different key workout to feel like if you should move the needle a little bit faster. The way that typically I would say to advance yourself over the scope of training, if you felt like the 20-minute distance test went well and you feel kind of proud about that effort there, is break down our 10-week training block. And so our first unload week is going to be on week 4, and we're going to come back in week 5. So we're halfway through our cycle right there. It's a great opportunity and not unreasonable to think that after training for 3 very hard weeks and then kind of running easy for a week that you've gained fitness. And so it might be a great opportunity coming off of that first unload to test again. And if you test and test more favorably at that point, then your paces will come along with you. Or if you're starting to feel much, much more comfortable and confident in your pace ranges, you might be able just to push it just a few seconds a mile. So this is all moot if the goal pace is 30 seconds per mile faster than what you're hoping. I mean, you might be able to get it in performance tests. 10 weeks, kind of actually a truncated timetable for the half marathon in general, especially for like huge performance gains like that. So, but what we're looking for is to move it forward just a little bit at a time. So that's what I would say, is to think of it more in 4-week blocks. And could you do a pace advancement coming into 4 weeks of this challenge? Could you do a second pace advancement around the 8-week mark of this challenge that sets you up for a possible half marathon pace? But that performance testing along the way is a great way to kind of check in, see how things are, And although the 20-minute test is certainly challenging and can be a little bit daunting, it does serve as a great 20-minute workout. You know, I love having some of my athletes like really shooting for time goals. I'll call it race early and often during their training process. And we use those kind of B races as workouts along the way because they can consistently race 5Ks and even 10Ks sometime without the lengthy recovery time of half marathons, etc. So you can kind of incorporate those hard pace races into your training, and that is the best way to kind of get a sense of really where your pacing is go out and race kind of a little bit shorter race distances, start to see how those paces compare to your goal half marathon pace, and when they start lining up, that's a good story. If it continues to be a little bit off, it's pretty unlikely that you jump and make up a 10-minute gap on race day just because of a particular number goal. You got to make sure you're tracking it alongside with your current fitness. And that's the best way to set yourself up for a success and pleasant experience come race day, is that testing along the way. So that would be my best advice there on just trying to match your training paces to goal race paces, is make sure that they're close and make sure that you're moving the needle forward. Keep testing coming off of those unload weeks, but we want to be advancing that thing just slowly throughout the scope of the process, because as I mentioned, it's absolutely reasonable to think that as we go on, you're getting a little bit fitter, have a little bit better endurance, a little bit more proficient at the pace. So we just want to keep going back, testing that as we go through. Well, ladies and gents, that is all we have here for week 2. Thanks as always for being here. Can't wait to be back here next Friday for week 3. Have an amazing one. See you then.